Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with stuffed pork chops. That's right, I'm going to show you my favorite technique for stuffing pork chops, as well as showing you one of my favorite stuffings for pork. And above and beyond producing something that's visually impressive, we are also with this method flavoring our pork chops from the inside. And by the way, keep in mind this is just a techniques video, and this is going to work no matter what stuffing you decide to use. Although the peach stuffing you're about to see was really good. So feel free to do this as shown. And to get started, the first thing we'll do is crisp up a few strips of bacon in a nonstick pan, which as usual we will do over medium heat. And once we have most of that fat rendered out, and our bits of bacon are browning up beautifully, we'll go ahead and use that rendered fat to saute some diced onion, as well as some diced green poblano chili, which I really wanted to be jalapeno, but inexplicably the store was out. But anyway, what we'll do is cook that stirring for about 5 or 6 minutes, or until our onions start to soften up and turn translucent. And once that happens, we can go ahead and throw in our cubed up peach, which because we're big fans of multitasking, we should probably prep while our bacon, onions, and peppers are cooking. And to do that, we will take a knife and cut into the peach right in the middle, into the crease if we can find it. Alright, this didn't really have a pronounced one, but whatever the closest to cleavage you can find. And we'll slice in and cut all the way around, and then we'll simply twist the two halves, which should separate just like this if you're using a freestone peach. Okay, if you're using a clingstone, it won't. And at that point, just start peeling and slicing. But if it does come apart like this, and your peach is nice and ripe, that stone should pull out very easily. If it's ripe. If it's still firm and underripe like this one, it will be very hard to pull out. Which most times would be upsetting, but actually for stuffing like this, being a little bit firm is okay. And then what we'll do is peel off the skin before cutting these into like 1/4-inch cubes. And for that, I like to give it one slice like this. Oh, and please be careful. A peeled peach is a slippery peach, so keep your fingertips out of the way. And then we'll cut those two pieces into strips, after which we can turn it and simply slice across into cubes. And the good news here, even though this was still fairly firm, it was actually still nice and sweet. And yes, feel free to substitute any other fresh fruit you like. I mean, you are after all the HR puffin stuff of your stuffing stuff. And once we have that stuff done, we'll go ahead and check our onions. And once those onions have softened up and turned translucent, we can go ahead and add our peach. And we will stir all that together. And what we'll want to do here, still on medium heat, is cook these stirring until they just start to soften up and get tender, which is going to depend on how ripe they were. Alright, this might only take you like a minute or two, or if they were really firm like mine, maybe it takes you 5 or 6 minutes. And one clue you're going to have is you're going to see some moisture coming out and bubbling. But an even bigger clue is that you'll test them with a fork. And as soon as they are tender, we'll go ahead and pull that off the heat and transfer it into a mixing bowl where we will add the rest of our stuffing stuff. And man, did that smell good. But anyway, once that's been bowled, we'll go ahead and add some freshly picked thyme leaves, or the chopped pork-friendly herb of your choice. We will also do some freshly ground black pepper, some salt of course, as well as the customary shake of cayenne. And then as far as our binder goes, I'm going with some crushed up crackers. Alright, saltines to be exact. But of course, if you wanted, you could use some crunched up bread cubes, or some breadcrumbs, or even some cornbread would be nice. And we'll go ahead and give that a mix, and then decide if it needs any more liquid, which depending on how juicy your fruit is and other ingredients, you may not need. But after a little bit of stirring, I decided I did. So I snuck in a couple tablespoons of chicken stock, and then continued mixing. And then what I suggest we do here, after this is mixed, we should probably refrigerate it, since a cold stuffing is always easier to stuff something with than a warm or room temperature stuffing. So we'll go ahead and pop that in the fridge while we proceed to prep our pork. And what I have here are 2 extra thick, center cut, boneless pork chops, which yes is one of the ultimate culinary oxymorons, since by definition a chop is a piece of meat that has a rib attached. And then the key to cutting a perfect pocket inside these is visualization. So before we stick the knife in, we're going to place the knife on top and just watch the movements of what's going to happen inside the pork. So we're going to stick that in the center, and then slice one way and then turn and slice the other. Alright, going as close as we can without poking through the edge. And by visualizing that first, I think it's going to be a lot easier when we actually stick the knife in, which we want to make sure we do into the fat side, exactly halfway down. And one of the keys here is we're using the tip of the knife to cut the pocket inside, but please note where the knife goes into the meat, we are not moving. Alright, that is our fulcrum. And we kind of want to leave the knife fixed there and just use the tips in both directions to make that pocket nice and big inside. And by doing it that way, you're going to ensure that your incision is not too large, and we won't have too much of that stuffing spilling out. And of course, having said that, once the pocket is made, we do want to make sure we have at least 2 inches to get the stuffing in. So once we're happy with our pocket, we can do a little bit of fine-tuning to that part. And that's it. Once that's been accomplished, we can go ahead and fill these with our stuffing. And no, there is no graceful way to do this. All right, just go ahead and grab that stuff and shove it in like no one's watching. Which reminds me, ideally no one's watching. And of course, we really want to make sure we're pushing that stuff in all the way to the edges of our pocket. And that's it. As long as you visualized and got a pretty decent pocket cut, this really is not a very hard procedure. And then once those are set, before we head to the stove, we'll go ahead and season those generously on both sides with some salt. And then what we'll do is roast these in a nice hot oven. But first we want to sear those in a little bit of oil set over high heat. And we'll place those down and let them go for about 3 or 4 minutes, or until that side gets some beautiful browning on it. And because we're going to pan roast these, we really only need to get a good sear on one side. So we'll just leave those alone for about 3 minutes or so. And then we'll go ahead and flip those over. And that's it for the stovetop step. These pork chops are now ready to transfer into the center of a 400-degree oven for about 15 minutes or so, or until cooked to your liking, which for me was an internal temp of about 145 to 150. Or as I like to say, until they look like this. And then what we'll do is carefully remove those to a plate, which I did all wrong. All right, grab them on the sides so you don't crush that stuffing eruption. But it's fine, it's still going to look amazing. Anyway, we'll remove those and cover them with a little bit of foil while we make our sauce. And we can remove the stuffing that's spilled out and just serve it on the plate. Or if you want, just leave it in the pan while we make the sauce. It really doesn't matter. And what we're going to do here is add a splash of chicken broth, as well as a couple tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. And we're going to turn our heat on to medium-high. And then give this a stir to deglaze the bottom while we wait for it to come up to a boil. Oh, and just like you can use any stuffing you want in this, we could have used any other kind of liquid and vinegar we wanted in our sauce. All right, whether you use fruit juice or white wine, or red wine vinegar or white vinegar or sherry vinegar, the procedure is exactly the same. And by the way, if you don't place a towel on that hot handle, there is a 100% chance you burn yourself. So always keep a towel on the handle. And then to finish this super simple sauce, what we'll do as soon as that starts to boil is turn off the heat and then stir in a chunk of cold butter. And as long as we keep that moving, it's going to emulsify into that warm acidic liquid. And it's going to thicken it up and make it nice and shiny. And that, my friends, is how you make every pan sauce in the world. And that's it. As soon as that butter disappears, it is ready to spoon over our now plated pork chop, which, even though I wrecked the appearance of the stuffing that was poking out with my tongs, still looks pretty good. But anyway, I went ahead and spooned that over and decided it did not need any garnishing. There was just nothing that was going to make this look any better. So I grabbed a fork and knife and went in for a taste. And we'll get to the taste in a minute. But as far as the appearance goes, I really think this came out amazingly well. You can see here that perfectly positioned pocket of stuffing, which does take a few minutes of effort, but really does produce quite an impressive presentation. Which of course wouldn't matter if this didn't taste good. But that wasn't a problem, as this really was spectacular. All right, thanks to that nice hot oven and relatively short cooking time, plus having our nice moist stuffing inside, this pork was wonderfully tender and juicy, and literally flavored from the inside out. And while so many different kinds of stuffings could work here, when you have the sweetness of peach, and the savoriness of those onions and peppers, and that little bit of smoky, meaty goodness from the bacon, just oh so subtly scented with that thyme, you are talking about a world-class pairing with pork. And even though there's not a lot of it, having that buttery sweet and sour pan sauce to go with it really puts it over the top. So I just absolutely loved how this came out. And yes, in case you're wondering, you can absolutely grill these instead of doing them in the oven. Although in that case, you will have to make a sauce separately, which is really not that hard. But anyway, whether you do these on a nice smoky grill outside, or inside in your oven like I did these, either way, I really do hope you give these a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.